Today, I'm so excited because we're here again for yet another series titled Effective Communication, a Marital Serenity Tool. In this series, we shall be looking at what communication is, the different barriers to effective communication in marriage, and the sabotaging effect of lack of communication in marriage. But most importantly, we shall be looking at tools that can help you overcome the challenges of ineffective communication in your marriage. Your marriage needs emotional and physical bond, strong emotional and physical bond for it to succeed. And the outcome of this success impacts on everything you do in life. Your work life, your parenting style, your sex life, your home, everything would suffer when you do not communicate effectively. When you do not share your thoughts and your feelings with your partner, then your marriage will certainly suffer. This makes it important to learn the act of effective communication with your spouse. Even when the subject matter appears awkward or uncomfortable, you still need to communicate about it. What then is communication? So communication is the transmission or transfer of information from one place to another and from one person to another. It is a two-way link that involves speaking and listening, and it is used to build connection, trust, and to express your needs to the other person. Communication is vital in any relationship, be it a marriage relationship, parenting relationship, in a team, and even a boss and employee relationship at the workplace. It becomes then paramount to learn how to communicate effectively. This is what we term good communication. It is an essential part of any healthy relationship because it helps you manage conflict and to build trust. Effective communication in marriage makes a huge difference between a long-lasting relationship, between a long-lasting marriage union with less stress, and that union, that marriage that is toxic and headed for ruin. Research shows that 86% of divorced couples said they had communication problems in their marriage. Usually, when you ask people or couple what they feel is the most important factor in marriage, you hear things like trust, love, honesty, and so on. Yes, all these factors are important, but there is one factor which connects respect, and this factor is usually the least talked about. This factor is effective communication, and it is ironic that it is the least mentioned because it is impossible to truly love someone who you do not respect. It is practically impossible. The way married couples discuss crucial issues determines the sustenance and the fulfillment of their marriage. The act of effective communication is a skill that can be learned by anyone. If you're still wondering why and how this can be, then come along with me in this series as we explore further. Communication is vital for the survivor of your marriage. The importance of communication in marriage cannot be overemphasized. When couples do not talk about their thoughts and what they feel, especially when there is an issue to address, that problem becomes magnified and compounded with anger, resentment, fear, and a host of other disempowering emotions. At that time, when you are angered or feel resentful, your emotions are running high and the problem appears insurmountable. This is why a lot of couples put off dealing with problems and they stop talking, they stop communicating. However, the solution lies in effective communication, as most of these problems can be resolved on time through effective communication. Most often, couples assume that since they are married, that intimacy should happen automatically. But intimacy is something that should be nurtured for it to grow. That spark you felt when you first met is something that must be continually nurtured and illuminated through effective communication. It is important for couples to learn how to communicate on every topic, ranging from finance to sex to business to parenting, everything. For instance, if you must discuss sex, then you must learn the act of effective communication, because it is important to discuss this in order to have a good experience of it. There is a whole lot to discuss on the subject matter for couple to find fulfillment. Forget that myth that you often hear, or the myth that you were taught, that sex is the most natural thing in the world and that intimacy can just happen naturally. Lies, I tell you. You need to nurture it for it to grow. Sex is a learned behavior, and intimacy takes nurturing and active choice, which can only grow through effective communication. A good marriage flourishes on the exchange of communication. In fact, effective communication is one of the most important aspects of a satisfying marriage. The way you communicate can make or mar your marriage. Do not develop the bad habits and create destructive patterns when things are not going well. Instead, use effective communication to reset every challenge you have in your marriage. How does this work? How does communication work? You often hear people in troubled marriage say things like, "We no longer communicate." However, in the actual sense, it is possible that what they meant is that we no longer communicate effectively. Because the truth is that everybody communicates. Even those couples that give each other silent treatment, they still communicate in different ways. The underlying factor here, or the question to answer here, is how does this communication take place? And we shall be looking at it in our series tomorrow. Until I come your way again tomorrow, I remain your Serenity Coach, Chineye. Bye. Good day. You're welcome again to day 2 on the series, Effective Communication, a Marital Serenity 2. On the second day of the series, we shall be looking at how can we actually communicate? What are the pathways to communication? So there are different pathways to communication, and communication in marriage is not exempted. Some of the pathways to communication is 1, the context of the situation. 2, non-verbal expression, which includes your facial expression, your gestures, your behavior, your body language. 3, your emotions. 4, spoken and written communication. And 5, touch. These are the pathways to communication. Usually, we tend to focus only on words, but in the actual sense, this is just but a fraction of the information shared back and forth between couples. Note that you are constantly giving out signals, and these signals are picked by people and interpreted. You may not necessarily need to say a thing to convey a message to your spouse, and that is why your spouse can sense when you're resentful, when you're stressed, when you're angry, when you're happy, and all this determines how your spouse responds to what you're communicating. Avoid sending multiple signals or multiple messages that are contradicting at the same time. You may want to say something else but mean something else. through the signal you send. You might be saying a thing with a good intention, but your facial expression or your body language contradicts what you're saying. And this, in fact, is the reason why couples conflict and misunderstand each other. Communication in marriage can be complex. This is why you need to learn the act of effective communication, because communication in itself is more difficult than what people perceive or believe ordinarily. It can be quite a task handling and juggling, processing all the information coming at you. But you can do that by trying to be calm. Always try to be calm and take a closer look at the typical fight between you and your spouse. Identify the different types of information you have given out to your spouse during the conflict. Take the findings from this and intentionally do something about it when next a conflict arises. Remember, conflict in marriage is not a bad thing in itself, so long as you fight fair. So conflict in marriage can actually help to skyrocket growth and to build a healthier bond between couples, so long as you fight fair. Please, by conflict here, I do not refer to violence or abuse, but I am referring to conflict. And yes, it is okay to conflict as a couple, so long as you fight fair. When conflicting, talk about your communication gaps. Talk about the communication problems with your spouse after the fight. Do not talk about the topic of the fight in itself, but try to identify the gaps in your communication that actually made you to misunderstand each other. After you must have identified this communication gap, it becomes easier for you to resolve that conflict because you are more open to apologize or empathize. This can open up a whole lot of new understanding of the problem for both of you. So it is important to evaluate your marriage communication. Is your marriage communication effective? There is one question you need to answer for yourself. There are different types of communication in marriage, and for the purpose of this series, I would be mentioning two: the verbal and the non-verbal communication. The verbal communication is your ability to express how you feel through the words you speak. Your choice of words, your tone, the volume you use. These three things are very crucial and important when using verbal communication. If you love someone with all your heart, but you do not say it, how will the person know? If you appreciate your spouse, but never speak about it, how then would your spouse know this? Your spouse is not a mind reader. Being able to tell your spouse how wonderful they are will make them feel loved, appreciated, and in touch with how you feel. If you want serenity and you value serenity in your marriage, then you will not take the act of verbal communication lightly. Always, you should be able to speak about your feelings, about the things that make you happy, not just the things you are sad about. So it is important to discuss both feelings in a marriage relationship and in any relationship that ought to be healthy. Communication between married couple is imperative to marital serenity and sanity. The lack of communication in marriage, especially verbal communication, can cause a huge toll on your mental health. Number two, non-verbal communication. When communicating something in a non-verbal way, it is important to mind your expressions, because we actually communicate non-verbally to everyone we meet, be it friend, family members, or spouse. You need not say a word, but you have just told a story with the way you react or behave, with your facial expression, your body language, and your gestures. So, nonverbal communication includes things like body expression, facial expression, your body movements, your gestures. These are all parts of nonverbal communication. We cannot talk about the importance of effective communication in marriage without outlining verbal and nonverbal communication. These two form a huge part of communication in marriage, because most often it is even the nonverbal communication that causes conflict in marriage. Also, take note that when using both, it is possible to use both at the same time, and most times we use both though. So when using both, you must not allow them to contradict each other. You must ensure that your verbal and your non-verbal communication aligns with the message you are trying to send. For instance, when you lean forward and close to your spouse while trying to discuss an important matter, or maybe you want to say something like "I love you" to your spouse, this naturally makes your spouse to open up. Your spouse will subconsciously feel safe and become vulnerable to you in a good way. When communicating with your spouse with a non-verbal communication, face your spouse and keep your body language open when having a difficult conversation. This helps you to connect with each other. No leg crossing, no arm crossing. Your body should always show your spouse that you are open to hearing what they have to say and you are willing to work through it. This is very important. Here are some of the things you need to avoid with nonverbal communication. Do not turn away from the person speaking. Do not roll your eyes. Do not shake your head in dismay. Do not scroll through your phone while speaking, and do not keep your body posture closed. Always try to leave an open body expression that shows a sign of listening and welcoming. However, it is good to lean forward as an indication of interest in what the other person is saying. It is also very nice to make eye contact. This gives an impression that you are focused on what the person is saying. It is good to nod your head to let your spouse know that you are listening to what is being said. You need to be completely present in the moment, focusing on the dialogue. And lastly, you need to have a relaxed body posture that invites your spouse to listen to what you have to say at any time you communicate. So with this, we come to the end of this series tomorrow. Until I come your way again tomorrow, I remain your Serenity Coach, Shine Mobi. Bye. Good day. You're welcome to day 4 of our series, Effective Communication in Marital Serenity 2. Yesterday being the day 3, we looked at the different barriers to effective communication, and I did mention that I will be talking about 2 more barriers to effective communication and the level of communication today. The other 2 barriers I want to talk about on effective communication is being judgmental. Yes, being judgmental. The judgmental attitude is a great obstacle to communication in marriage. A partner may have a genuine worry, but the reality that the other partner would take sides or be judgmental about the concern will make this partner to suppress his or her feeling. And silence from suppressed emotions can be very dangerous to your marriage. It is good to listen to what your partner have to say attentively, and you can now present your thoughts rather than being judgmental. The last barrier to effective communication we will be looking at is assumption. This can be very fatal. Do not read your spouse's mind, and do not expect your spouse to read your mind in order to fulfill your imaginations. What makes sense to you might not make sense to your partner. What comes easy to you might not come easy to your partner. You have to speak out your mind and then allow your partner to also give their view of point. They should give their opinion so that both of you can come to a compromise or an agreement. This is the essence of effective communication. Assumptions leads to resentment and bitterness, which makes your spouse feel inadequate and not being a part of that marriage. Having said that, we shall be moving on to look at 6 levels of communication in marriage. Communication transcends everything as a couple. So it is important, it transcends everything. It becomes then important to handle everything so long as effective communication is involved. It becomes important to talk about everything. That is how you can overcome conflict. You can talk about issues of parenting, issues of finance, and issues of sex. You can discuss virtually anything that is your concern or things that comes up in your mind as a couple. A lack of communication precedes almost all problems that arises in marriage. So every problem that arises in marriage can directly or indirectly be traced to a lack of communication. As often as we speak about communication, some couple hear the word and they immediately think about long, deep conversation about intimate things. But this is not always the case. Even 10, 15, 30 minutes effective communication can go a long way to save your marriage. Here are some 6 types of communication in marriage, or let's say 6 levels of communication in marriage. You would notice that communication usually starts by small interactions and they gradually become intimate. The first level of communication we should be looking at is the basic information. This is the day-to-day conversation between a husband and a wife where they share details. For example, you could say, dinner is ready. My parents are going on a vacation. Or you could say to your spouse, have a great day. Why this is obviously important. It is an important conversation to make, but it relates basically to facts. And that is why we term it as the first level of communication in marriage. The second level of communication is what we can call partnership. This involves sharing needs because the husband and the wife are partners. They share responsibility, children, finances, and more. Communicating about these shared actions hence becomes vital. This includes talking about parenting and every other issues that arises as the day go on. Partnership is central in any healthy marriage. So this second level of communication is also vital, but it is still at the surface level. The third level of communication is the level of conflict resolution. So I hear fairly often from couples who like to brag that they never fought. And this is possible because when you effectively communicate, you are more able to handle your conflict. You are more able to resolve any conflict that arises. Hence, it becomes impossible to fight dirty. This always gives a pause when you hear this, but it is possible. People can disagree. It is not a big deal. The way you manage it is what matters. So you need to learn to be kind, to listen, to seek understanding. The goal of your marriage is not to avoid fight, but to resolve conflict. And this is the third level of communication. Your ability to resolve your conflict when it arises shows the depth you have gotten to in communicating in your marriage. To fight fair, you must learn to state the facts and give proofs or feelings for what you're saying. For instance, you might argue that there's no need for a change of school for your child. In saying this, it is important to present facts. So you could simply say something like, I think it would be a mistake to change school for our child at this time because his result or her result is X, Y, and Z with a proof of the report card of the result. This level of communication is meant to open up more discussion and not for you people to disagree and spit venom at each other. Most often you find that children or even adults who grew up as children in a violent home or products of divorce that were not managed well, they tend to avoid conflict even in their adulthood because they worry that this might end the relationship. But this is me telling you today that conflict in marriage is not a bad thing. The most important thing is to learn how to resolve those conflicts and not allow it to degenerate, because your ability to resolve your conflicts in marriage will make you grow stronger and healthier in that marriage. Communication during times of difficulty is a way to ensure such conflicts do not arise again. And even when it does, you become equipped on how to handle it. In fact, conflict often happens during times of growth. The fourth level of communication is what can be termed connection. Yes, connection. At this level, you are able to share your emotions. You share how you feel. This is a deeper level of communication within couples where they have reached certain depth of emotional connection that permits them to open up and be vulnerable to each other. You can do this through eye contact, through physical affections, and through the words you choose to say. As humans, we are designed to seek connection. Research shows that couples reach 100 points of connection during an average meal time. And that's to say that meal time is a great time for connection. Hence, meal time can help you connect and build your effectiveness in communication. It becomes easy at that time. But when you are at the level of ineffective communication, no meal time can do any magic for you. The fifth level of communication is personal revelation. Yes, this allows couples to express true bond of trust between themselves and allow them to listen to each other's needs actively, acknowledging that they have heard and understood themselves. So in this level of communication, couples are able to reaffirm each other that they understood what the other person is trying to say. Here, they open up their emotion and tell their spouse about their feelings, be it good or bad. Then, both of you, the couples can now share their opinions in order to reach an agreement. This type of communication lets your spouse into your word. That is what this level of communication does. It helps you as a couple to process negative feelings, and it is one of the healthiest things to do as a couple. Your ability to process the negative feeling of your partner. You are able to process all emotions at this level, be it anger, frustration, fear. without hurting your spouse. And this is a very, very powerful level of communication to get to. We'll stop here for today, and we shall be looking at the final level of effective communication tomorrow. Until I come your way again tomorrow, I remain your Serenity Coach, Chineye Nwobi. Bye.